Welcome to the Black Father's Pulse, the podcast where fatherhood meets purpose. I'm Dr. Alvin Thomas, clinical psychologist and professor, here to guide you through the multifaceted journey of Black fatherhood. Please note, the views expressed here are my own and not those of my employer. But get ready to dive into the dynamic world of Black fatherhood, where we celebrate the highs, tackle the lows, and share plenty of laughs along the way. Let's keep the pulse of fatherhood beating strong and vibrant. Welcome to the Black Father's Pulse, where we talk about fatherhood, community, and policy that impacts our families. I'm Dr. Alvin Thomas, and today we've got a really special guest, Congressman Jimmy Gomez from California, who has represented California's 34th Congressional District since 2017. As a first-generation Mexican-American, he's been a leading voice on healthcare access, workers' rights, and paid family leave. He made headlines in 2021 when he brought his newborn son, Hodge, to the House floor during the Speaker vote, highlighting the importance of balancing parenthood with public service. We're excited today to have him share his perspective on fatherhood and policy with us today. He's a dedicated dad and a founding member of the Congressional Dads Caucus. Congressman Jimmy Gomez, welcome to the show. It's really exciting to have you here.
Dr. Thomas, thank you for having me.
Let's start first with something that caught my attention. That's, of course, the Dads Caucus. You started it in Congress, and I love that because you don't always see fatherhood talked about in politics. What was that moment when you said, you know what, we need a Dads Caucus? What led up to that?
Oh, thank you. First, thank you for having me. One of the things that I was doing is, I was a new time dad. I think my son was almost about 5 months old, and it was during the speaker's vote. Everybody is the same day as the swearing in. So everyone brings their family, everyone brings their children, and that's where you want to show them off. You want to take a photo for posterity, and that's kind of what we did. But we had no idea that the speaker vote would take, over 4 days, 15 rounds of votes, just craziness. And my family was there, and it was just going on and on and on, and he was getting fussy. So I decided to, what I wanted to do was calm him down. And since he was a few months old, I would put him in a baby carrier and I would walk him around the neighborhood. And I would always face him out so he could see things. And that's what I did. I put him in the baby carrier, faced him out, and then I missed a vote on the speaker's vote on one of the rounds. And they call you back around and say, hey, you missed the vote. How do you vote? So I went out there with him in the baby carrier. That moment went viral. I ended up getting a lot of praise for being a dad while working, but at the same time, I recognize that women do that all the time and often get criticized for it. And later that night, I ended up getting a call or a message on DM from a news outlet that wanted to talk to me. My staff wasn't around, and I was like, I don't know, I'll just talk to her. And I ended up talking to this reporter for over 2 hours about fatherhood, about my ideas, what it meant to have him. It was just kind of a nice thing. And one of the things is I started thinking about kind of all the work that I've done. I was a big advocate for paid family leave because of an experience I had when I was a kid. I got sick with pneumonia, spent a week in the hospital, and my parents had to miss work. Plus the fact that we didn't have health insurance, it almost bankrupted my family. So I worked on paid family leave, and this individual I knew, she said, you should start a Dads Caucus. We tried to do it for a number of years, bipartisan, bicameral, but Republicans would always back out. And and I was like, and I said, yeah, I'm going to do it, but I'm only going to do it with Democrats to build a proof of concept, right? To show people that it could work. So we started off with 6 members. One of them was Rashida Tlaib, because she started the year before she started the Mama's Caucus. Right. And I was only, I think, one of 2 male members that were part of the Mama's Caucus. So it was, we started it, trying to prove that it can be something that could get people's attention. And I wanted to start with simple policy ideas. 1, we're going to do more as dads in the halls of Congress fighting for family-friendly policies. 2, we're going to try to do more at home as well, right? If you're going to talk the talk, you're going to walk the walk. And that's starting with your own kids. And a lot of dads were like, yeah, of course, I already do that. So we started the Dads Caucus with 6 members. Now we're up to 45 members. And our 3 main policy pillars started off with paid family leave, a child tax credit, and affordable childcare. But now members have had their own ideas. One wanted to do a working group on gun violence prevention, did that. One wanted to say, hey, mental health is something that men don't talk about, fathers don't talk about. We should be able to talk about that more. And he formed that group. Another one wanted to do something on social media. So we did social media technology in the family. So like dads are feeling more comfortable talking about these issue areas that before it was like, that's a women's issue, right? There was always these stereotypes of what men should be fighting for, what issues. And I think the Dads Caucus gave them a little bit more flexibility to say, no, I'm going to talk about paid leave. I'm going to talk about the child care. I'm going to talk about the harms of social media on our children. And it's great because it's one of the few caucuses that spans the ideological divide. You have moderate Democrats and very left Democrats all in one caucus. We're up to 45 members and have a lot more work to do, but we're excited. Recently, the leader of the Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, asked to join the caucus. So he's one of our new members this year as well.
So I know that part of the work was over the last 2 to 3 years, engaging in proof of concept, being able to show that this is necessary, that there's general interest in it, and hopefully from proof of concept among Democrats, being able to draw like-minded Republicans. I think Sting talked about it. He says, I hope the Russians love their children too. And so I assume that both Democrats and Republicans, people on all sides of the aisle, love their children, want to see the best for their children. How has that been going as far as being able to get persons from the other side of the political aisle on this caucus involved in this struggle for support for fathers and fatherhood?
One thing is I wanted to make sure that people were join the caucus, not just so I can say I joined the Dads Caucus and use that as a branding thing, but often work for a like-minded purpose. So in order to join the Dads Caucus, you need to support 3 things: the national paid leave policy, the affordable childcare, and the enhanced child tax credit. And for Republicans, I said, you don't even need to do all 3, just support one. I did talk to a Republican that he was supportive of all 3. This was last year, and I wanted to get past the elections to give him breathing room. And so I'm going to approach him again and see what his thoughts are about joining. Love for him to join the caucus. We'll see, because a lot of the political environment is very kind of toxic right now, and it's very partisan. But I have good conversations with the Republicans, and some of them definitely like the idea. It just will put them in a politically awkward position to join the Democrats on anything. There's one out there that I know he's expressed interest, and I have to approach him again.
Okay, let's move over to something a little bit less political and more individual and human, for want of a better word. So let's talk about your experiences as a dad. So you became a dad while you were serving in Congress.
Yeah.
What was that transition like? Were there these new dad moments for you where you were like, oh my God, this is harder than legislating?
No, definitely. Dr. Thomas, let me touch on one thing that you said. Something that humanizes, something that we all have in common. Starting the Dads Caucus and becoming a dad has allowed me to have conversations with a lot of Republicans who are dads of older kids or even recent dads. And we have these conversations about the challenges of serving and being a father, right? Some of us have to travel 5.5 hours one way from east to west, and then 4.5 hours from west to east. And that time difference is difficult. It was hard when I didn't have a kid, but now that I have a kid, I leave early in the morning, and the minute I get back, I'm on dad duty, right? So I might get back at 11 o'clock or even 1 a.m., which makes it like really 4 a.m. East Coast time. But the next morning he wakes up 6:30 on the dot, no matter what, right? So he's going to want to eat. He doesn't care if you're tired or not. So that's what makes it kind of like more of a challenge, is that their needs come first. They don't care what's going on at work. They only care about, like, are you playing with them? Are you making them laugh? Are you giving them the food and the strawberries and the berries that they want, right? So that's all they care about. So that's what has made it tougher. But honestly, I wouldn't change it for anything. I was ready to be a dad. My wife and I had a long discussion of how we would divide the work. She was afraid that I was going to be she was going to be the default parent. And in some respects, when I'm gone, she is. When I'm here, I have to step up. Just the amount of energy you need. Also, nobody told me about the toddler years. Like, wow, these kids do not stop. They do not stop.
No.
They're it's great. Like, I wouldn't change it for anything. It's kind of given me a renewed vigor to keep up the fight. Because in the end, I always told people, I always thought that my legacy would be being an elected official, laws that I passed an expansion of paid family leave in California. And then slowly, when you have a child, you realize, no, this is my legacy, right? This little human who will outlive me. They will be able to pick up where I left off, or be able to fight for the issues that if I instill, I hope the right values, he will be able to fight for those values in his own way. So that's my legacy, not the office, not being a member of Congress, or not the legislation I passed, but this individual who can carry that fight for a lot longer than I will ever be around.
So I know we've not seen any viral videos of Hodge crashing a Zoom meeting or congressional session. We would love to see that if that would happen. So I know very often it takes for individuals to be in a particular position to actually understand the stress of that position. Often we see people suddenly having a change of heart on issues of disability, issues of identity, issues of access to health, when they themselves are suddenly going through some of those experiences. That sense of individualism of the struggle. How has being a dad, becoming a dad, I know you always were preparing yourself for it, but how has actually stepping into all of the stresses and challenges and beauty and messiness and excitement of being a dad changed or affected how you approach both politics and policy? Does it make you see things different?
I grew up the youngest of 6 kids, and of immigrant parents. 4 of my siblings were born in Mexico. My parents worked 4 to 5 jobs a week to make ends meet. We didn't have health insurance. So I kind of, from a young age, understood, if I get sick and we have to go to the hospital, I might hurt my family financially, or we can't afford it, right? It was always, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. And so I was always sensitive to that. And I think that's made me who I am. How am I going to fight for parents and kids, right? And the stresses that kids go through. Like, I tell the story that I almost bankrupted my family. Well, how did you know that at such a young age? And said, well, we didn't get Christmas presents that year. And my siblings blamed me for it. And trauma imposed by your own siblings, right?
So that's a scar.
That's a scar. But that's kind of what led me to fight for these policies, paid family leave. Always thinking about working people. As a dad, you get a better sense of it, from changing diapers, the amount of time, the fact that when parents are working all the time, how tired they are and how stressful that is when it comes to kids. I joke around. I always thought my mom was mean because she was mean, but I would be mean too. If I went to work at 8 a.m., for my first job, finished up at 2, when it got lunch, and then I would go for my second job and I wouldn't be home till about 11:30. Then she did that 6-7 days a week. So I would be cranky, right? I'd be angry and I wouldn't have the patience if I was that tired. So that's the kind of stuff that I kind of realized that, parents are under a lot of stress. And if we can help reduce that stress, then that stress isn't transferred to their child, right? It can be calmer. It can be more supportive. And not saying that parents that work all the time aren't supportive. That's not the case for everybody. But I know that it is extremely stressful and it is tiring. Kids are exhausting. And I don't think people realize that until you have a child, how exhausting they are. But I've learned, I'm not sure if I had patience because I've had Hodge, or I had patience because, I've had him when I was older. I was 47 when he was born, but I'm definitely have more patience than I ever thought I would have with having a kid. So it's been great.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So let's move on to policy. Paid family leave is a huge issue for fathers, and that's one of the bedrock policies of the Dads Caucus. It's a huge issue for fathers, especially Black and brown fathers in these communities where dads can't afford to take unpaid time off, for instance. How do we get more lawmakers to see that as a priority, especially in today's very complex and polarized political space?
So, great question. A lot of times people think in politics, you have to change people's mind before you change their behavior. In California, we passed paid family leave. The studies show that the people using it at first the most were, of course, the mothers. But then the number of fathers that started taking it increased over time. And you even saw that with caregiving. It was mostly women that were using the time off to take care of a sick family member. You're seeing some increases in men taking that time off as well. Not as much as women, that still has to change. But paid family leave really did change kind of how people view those moments, right? Statistics kind of show, hey, it's good for the mother. When a father takes time off, it actually helps reduce postpartum depression. It actually helps reduce anxiety. It really kind of, and then it increases the benefits for the child. So the way we kind of do it is that first we're modeling some of the behavior as we speak. Even Republicans talk about it, right? Remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton kind of talked about it a lot. She was campaigning on it. Then Ivanka Trump talked about it, and they started saying, well, we have a plan. Not be our plan for paid family leave because they wanted to build it off Social Security, and that would have kind of undermined the trust fund. But now they're like, oh, this is something that's needed. But also kind of recognize that when men, and start highlighting men who are taking it and making it kind of not a big deal. Good example, one of the Dads Caucus members, he was going to have another baby. And he was like, oh, how much time did you guys take off? How were you able to do it? We kind of joked around. I said, well, if you can plan it out where the baby's born on summer recess, but if you can't, just do it. Just be straight up. Go tell your constituents, hey, my wife just had a baby. I'm going to be there to bond with my child and to help my wife. People are going to be accepted. And this guy, his name's Seth Magaziner. He went on his local news show and said that's what he was doing. He got compliments. He didn't get criticized. And that's kind of how you change it. You encourage people to do it. And then we have to make sure that there's a program for everybody. Right now, it's state by state. We went from, I think in 2014 or 2016, we went from like 6 states. Now we're up to like 13 states that have a state program. But that leaves a lot of Americans still with not having paid family leave access. I think and also now even companies say, hey, we offer paid time off to bond with a newborn child or to help take care of a family member. They use that as a selling point because that's also what families are demanding. So, I think it's moving in the right direction. At the federal level, of course, it's a lot harder, but there's starting to be some consensus. I was, one last point on that, a bipartisan working group of Republicans and Democrats were formed a couple of years ago, and they were doing they did it through like the military, 12 weeks of time off, and now they're trying to work on it. And they invited me as the leader of the Dads Caucus to join that group. So there's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and we'll see what we can do, but at least there's that conversation going on.
So I think it's great that your colleague could have that conversation with other colleagues who are aware of those resources and the kinds of decisions that they can make. But we know that a lot of Black and brown men aren't aware of those opportunities, aren't aware of those policies and help that's available. What can, if anything, everyday dads do to push for those changes and be aware of some of the resources that are available to them?
First, they definitely have to look at their state and see if it has a paid family leave program. California, Washington, New York, Rhode Island, I think Massachusetts, a bunch of states have them now. So if you have a program, find out what the benefits are and if you qualify and how much income they're going to replace. Everybody has 12 weeks of unpaid leave, but most people can't ever afford to take off 12 weeks of unpaid leave. So that's the thing is first find out what your benefits are and then start if you don't have those kind of benefits, start talking to your local rep about the issues that you're dealing with. Share their personal stories. Try to get them to see if you can find somebody who would advocate. But I think there's movements for paid family leave all over the country, even in state by state levels. It might be harder in some states in what they call the Republican L, but it is a conversation that people are having. And unless people have that conversation and ask for it over and over again, it won't really sink into their elected officials' heads that this is something that they should fight for.
So finally, this is our lightning round.
Okay.
So let's do quick fire round, Dad Life Edition. Just say the first thing that comes to mind. I'm going to ask you a few questions and say the first thing that comes to mind. No need to explain it unless you really want to. Just lightning round. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, first one. The most unexpected thing about fatherhood for you?
The most unexpected. What goes in must come out.
That does not need any explanation. Your favorite dad superpower?
My favorite dad superpower would be energy. Yeah, like I would love to have just an abundance of energy where I don't have to sleep. If I can get their energy and put it in a pill form that I could take, even better.
You would be wealthy. What's your son's favorite thing to do with you?
Everything. He loves to sing and dance. He loves to play with Woody and Buzz. He loves to, go under a blanket. He loves it all. He's an amazing kid. He's fun.
Awesome. Diaper duty or bedtime stories? Which one are you better at?
Well, better at. I would prefer reading books because I can win up but at the same time, now he's picking the books that are really long. And I'm like, so, they're really long. And then there's this thing, we listen and we don't judge.
Don't judge. Yep.
I don't think I'm the only dad that skips a few pages during bedtime stories. We listen and we don't judge.
I am not going to judge you. That is hilarious. One piece of advice for new dads.
Enjoy it. Now, I know that sounds cheesy, but the energy you give the child, right? If you're nervous, the child's going to be nervous. But if you put this just positive and loving energy and time, that's all they want is time and attention. They're going to turn out great. All the other stuff is extra. But if you put in just calm, loving energy and attention, the kid is going to turn out amazing.
So I have two spaces. I have the Black Fathers Pulse podcast, which you're on now, and the Fatherhood blog, both of which present all kinds of different experiences that fathers are going through and offering expert advice and suggestions for how fathers can navigate this fatherhood journey. Is there a particular space where you get some of these resources for yourself as you go through this journey?
Yeah, I think part of it is I do follow different people on social media that I think are valid, right? They have good opinions, that they're actually parents or educators themselves. My wife and I have discussions about it. And then also just people you can have a honest conversation. Like some of my closest friends now are other members who have kids that are similar age. We have those conversations. Just being able to talk to somebody like, hey, what did you do in this situation? How did you handle it? Makes a difference. But there's definitely podcasts with the right, when they have good speakers and they have expertise helps, right? I get it from different books. I read a friend of mine, she was a member of the assembly when I served. She gave me a book called 12 Hours by 12 Weeks to help them sleep. Another friend just gave me a book about potty training, which now that's the next thing we have to do. So I'm kind of nervous about that.
What goes in must come out.
Exactly. So I think that there's a lot of different sources that I go to, but in the end, people that are kind of like-minded helps.
Well, I hope Fatherhood Depot, the blog, and the Black Fathers Pulse will hopefully be able to be resources that you can look to as well. Congressman Gomez, this has been really incredible. But before we wrap up, where can people learn about the Dads Caucus and support the work that you're doing?
We have my website at repjimmygomez.gov, and we also /Dads Caucus. And that's where we house the Dads Caucus, but they also can go on social media, look up the Dads Caucus handle, and we have information about the Dads Caucus there as well.
Thank you again for coming on, and more importantly, thanks for being a dad who's making a difference.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Black Father's Pulse. I'm your host, Dr. Alvin Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist, researcher, and director of the TriLab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Views shared on this podcast are mine or that of my guest and are not associated with the university. Original music for our series was composed and performed by Micaiah De Silva, artwork by Isabella Acra. The podcast is produced by me and is supported by the kind contributions of you, the public, and advertisers. Follow me on Twitter at Dr_AT758, that's Dr_AT758, or the Black Father's Pulse podcast on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to the Black Father's Pulse podcast wherever you do your podcast listening, and don't forget to share and leave us a positive review.